The day I found my mother sitting at my desk, reading through my open laptop, wasn't the day I decided to leave. That came later. But it was the day something inside me went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a decision you can't take back. I should back up. I grew up understanding that my space was never really mine. My bedroom door didn't have a lock. My diary was accidentally left open on the kitchen counter once, and my mother never apologized. She said she'd been worried about me, that reading it was an act of love. I was 15. I learned then that her love and my privacy could not exist in the same room at the same time. By the time I was 27, I had my own apartment, a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a small building in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'd spent 2 years saving, 2 years waiting, 2 years planning exactly how I would arrange my bookshelves and what color I'd paint my accent wall and how it would feel to wake up on a Saturday morning and not hear her footsteps in the hallway outside my door. It felt like breathing for the first time. The key situation, and I know people are going to ask about this because it's the obvious question, happened about 3 weeks after I moved in. I was carrying groceries up the stairs, and my mother was standing outside my door with a casserole dish and a look on her face I had known my entire life. That particular look she wore when she had already decided something and was waiting for me to agree. She said she'd been thinking. She said I lived alone. I was a young woman. Anything could happen. She said she wasn't trying to intrude. She just wanted to know that if I ever fell in the bathtub or had a medical emergency, someone could get to me. She said it so reasonably, so calmly, so wrapped in concern that I stood there in the hallway with my arms full of groceries and felt myself sliding backward into old patterns. I said I'd think about it. She called me 3 times that week. Each time the scenario got slightly more elaborate. A gas leak, a break-in, me unconscious and nobody able to reach me. By the 4th call, I was exhausted in the particular way that only she could make me feel. Not from any single thing she said, but from the cumulative weight of it, the way her worry always eventually became my responsibility to fix. I gave her a key. I told myself it was just for emergencies. I told myself I was being practical, not weak. I was weak. But I also want to be honest about why. It wasn't stupidity. It was 27 years of learning that saying no to my mother cost more than saying yes. The first time she used it, I was in the middle of a video call with a client. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I work from home, which means my apartment is also my office, which means the space is doubly mine. It's where I live and where I earn a living. I had a serious client on the screen, a marketing director from a firm in Atlanta, and we were 45 minutes into a logo revision discussion when I heard my front door open. I froze. The marketing director kept talking. I smiled at the camera and tried to keep my face neutral while I heard my mother moving through my kitchen, opening my refrigerator, setting things down on my counter. She appeared in the doorway of my living room where I'd sat at my desk and waved at me like she was arriving at a party. I excused myself from the call. The client was polite about it, but I saw something shift in his expression, that slight recalibration that happens when someone decides you are slightly less professional than they thought. After I ended the call, I explained to my mother that I worked from home. I explained that I had client calls. I explained that coming in unannounced wasn't something I could accommodate. She told me she brought food because she worried I wasn't eating properly. She told me I was being dramatic. She left 40 minutes later, having reorganized 2 of my kitchen cabinets in a way she found more logical. I changed my passwords that night. All of them. My laptop, my email, my phone. This is something I should have done already. I know that. But I hadn't felt the urgency until I saw her standing in my doorway while I was trying to hold on to a professional relationship I'd spent months building. 2 weeks passed without incident. I started to relax. I told myself the conversation had landed, that she understood, that we had turned a corner. Then I came home from a coffee meeting with another client and found a different casserole dish in my refrigerator and 2 throw pillows on my couch that I had never purchased. She had also moved my desk lamp to the other side of the desk, a lamp I had positioned specifically for the light angle during video calls. She'd left no note. I called her. She said the lamp had looked off-center. She said the pillows were a housewarming gift. She said I should be grateful. I want to describe what that conversation felt like because I think this is the part that's hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it. It wasn't one dramatic, terrible thing. It was the accumulation of 100 small reminders that my preferences in my own space were negotiable. My lamp position was up for debate. My cabinet organization was wrong. My diet was insufficient. My life, even now, even here, was a draft that she was still in the process of editing. I told her clearly, and I mean clearly in the way I had never quite managed to be before, no softening, no qualifying, that she was not to come into my apartment when I wasn't home. I told her the key was for emergencies only, and that I was redefining what counted as an emergency, and that reorganizing my furniture did not qualify. She went silent in that way she had. Then she told me I'd become cold since I moved out. Then she hung up. I installed a chain lock that evening. Not a full deadbolt replacement, just a chain, the kind that would make a clear statement if she tried to open the door while I was home. I also left a message with the building's front desk asking that no one be given access to my unit without my explicit written permission, and I made sure to get the name of the person I spoke to. His name was Darren. He was pleasant. He said, of course, absolutely. He completely understood. 3 weeks later, I came home from a run and found her sitting on my couch with a cup of tea, reading a magazine she had apparently brought with her. I stood in my own doorway. My chest went strange and tight. I asked her how she had gotten in. I'd had a chain lock installed. The chain was not engaged, which meant she had come in when I wasn't home. She said Darren had let her in. She said she told him she was my mother and that I was expecting her. She said it the way you describe stopping for gas, as a simple, practical matter, nothing worth discussing. I didn't argue with her that evening. I was too tired, and I had learned a long time ago that arguing with my mother when I was tired was like trying to bail water with my hands. I made polite conversation, I ate the food she brought, and after she left, I sat on my redecorated couch and stared at my repositioned lamp and felt something in me finish calculating. The next morning, I called the building management office, not the front desk, the actual management office. I explained the situation in full. I explained that I had explicitly asked the front desk not to give access to my unit without my written permission, and that this request had been ignored. I was professional. I was specific. I asked that a note be placed in my file and that all staff be reminded of my standing request. The manager was apologetic. She said Darren had made an error in judgment. She said it wouldn't happen again. It happened again. Not the following week. My mother was apparently giving me space, which in her language meant she was waiting to see if I would soften. But 2 weeks after my call to management, I came home from a weekend trip to visit a friend in Charlotte and opened my front door to find my living room rearranged. Not just the lamp. The furniture. My couch had been moved to face the window instead of the TV. My bookshelf had been reorganized by what appeared to be color. My kitchen. I walked into my kitchen and stood there for a long time. My kitchen had been deep cleaned in the particular way my mother deep cleaned things, where she moved everything, cleaned under it, and put it back somewhere different. My spices were in a new order. My dish towels were folded in the thirds instead of halves. She had been here for hours. I checked my laptop, and this is the part that shifted something permanently. There were browser tabs open that I had not opened. My email was open. I used auto login, another thing I hadn't thought to change. And there was a thread from a client visible on the screen. She had seen my work, my contracts, my rates, my professional correspondence. That was mine. That was the thing I had built entirely by myself, from nothing, with no help from her, and she had walked through it like it was a room she had every right to enter. I did not call her that night. I sat with it. I thought for a long time. In the morning, I called a locksmith and had my locks changed completely. New deadbolt, new keys. I told the locksmith I was having a security issue and I needed the old locks removed entirely, not just rekeyed. She nodded like she had heard this before. Then I went to the building management office in person. I sat down across from the manager and I asked her directly, had my mother been given access to my unit again, despite my standing written request? The manager looked uncomfortable. She said she would look into it. I said I had already looked into it, and I was asking her to confirm what I already suspected, which was that Darren had let my mother in a second time. She confirmed it. She said my mother had been very convincing. She said my mother had told Darren it was an emergency. I asked what the emergency was. There was no emergency. My mother had said she thought she smelled gas from the hallway and was worried about me. I went home and called a lawyer friend of mine just to understand my options. She told me that what my mother was doing, entering my residence without my permission, despite explicit instructions to the contrary, constituted trespass. She told me that if I wanted to pursue it formally, I could. She told me that a formal warning letter from an attorney would carry significant weight. I thought about it for 2 days. I thought about how my mother would respond to a letter from an attorney. I thought about the calls that would follow, the tears, the way she would tell the story to every relative we had in common. I thought about how I would be cast in that telling. The cold daughter, the ungrateful child, the girl who had become someone unrecognizable. I thought about my open email, my client files, my lamp, moved 3 times now from where I had put it. Then I started looking for a new apartment. I want to be honest about what this decision felt like, because I think people sometimes imagine it as a dramatic moment of clarity, a line crossed, a door slammed, a final speech. It wasn't like that for me. It was quieter. It was the feeling of looking around a space that was mine on paper but had never fully felt mine in practice, and deciding that I deserved to find out what mine actually felt like. I found an apartment in a different part of the city. Different building, different management company, different everything. It was slightly smaller than my current place, but it had a security door in the lobby that required a key fob to enter, and each unit had a video intercom system, and the building management had a strict no-entry policy that was printed in the lease. I signed the lease on a Tuesday. I told no one. I arranged the movers for a Saturday, and I scheduled them for early 7 in the morning, because I knew my mother's patterns and she was not a morning person, and I wanted to be as close to finished as possible before the day became complicated. I packed over the course of 3 evenings, 1 box at a time, doing it in a way that would not look like packing if she stopped by, moving things into my closet first, reducing the visible evidence gradually, the way you drain a tub slowly enough that you don't notice the water level dropping. The night before the move, I sat in my nearly empty apartment and ate takeout on the floor, because I'd already packed my dishes. I felt something I hadn't felt in months, the specific relief of a plan in motion. Not happiness, exactly. More like the way your shoulders drop when you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and you finally set it down. Moving day was quiet and efficient. The movers were professional. By noon, I was in my new apartment, sitting on my couch, which was where I had put it, in the position I had chosen, facing the direction I wanted, with my lamp on the left side of my desk because that is where I had always wanted it, and no one had ever asked. I changed my phone number 2 days later. I did not give the new number to my mother. I sent her a letter, an actual letter, paper and envelope, that explained I had moved, that I wished her well, that I needed space and distance to figure out what a healthy relationship between us could look like, and that I would reach out when I was ready. I did not include my new address. I had my mail forwarded through a P.O. box. I blocked her on email and social media. I did not block her entirely from my life. That was not what this was. This was a boundary, clean and clear, with consequences attached. Now I want to tell you what happened, because this is the part I didn't plan for, and it's the part that I've thought about many times since. On the Saturday after my move, 1 week later, I was at my new apartment on a video call with a client, lamp on the left, coffee getting cold on my right, when I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "This is the new tenant of your old apartment. Someone is trying to get into the unit. Police have been called." I read that text twice. Then I called the number back. The new tenant, a young woman named Stephanie who had moved in 4 days after me, which I didn't know, told me that at approximately 10:30 that morning, a woman had tried to enter the apartment using a key. The key hadn't worked, obviously, because the locks had been changed when I moved out, per standard procedure. The woman had then gone to the front desk and told Darren that she was the resident's mother, and she needed to be let in because she was worried about her daughter. Darren, apparently undeterred by the 2 prior incidents and the formal warning on file, had brought her upstairs. Stephanie had opened the door to find a woman she had never seen and a building employee she barely knew standing in the hallway outside what was now her apartment, and she had said, quite reasonably, "Can I help you?" My mother had looked past Stephanie into the apartment and said, "Stephanie told me this almost word for word. Where is all her furniture?" Stephanie told her she lived there now. My mother had apparently stood very still for a long moment. Then she had told Darren that something was wrong, that her daughter wouldn't have moved without telling her, that something must have happened. Darren, now realizing he had made a significant professional error for the third time, had started to look concerned. My mother had started to cry. Someone in the hallway had called 911 because a woman was crying outside an apartment and wouldn't leave. The police arrived about 8 minutes later, 2 officers. They spoke with my mother, they spoke with Stephanie, they spoke with Darren. They confirmed that I was no longer a resident at that address. They confirmed that the current resident did not know my mother and had not invited her. They asked my mother several times if she had any information about my whereabouts or any reason to believe I was in danger. She told them I had not told her I was moving. One of the officers, Stephanie told me, had responded to that very gently but very clearly, that an adult woman having moved without informing a family member was not a police matter and was not evidence of harm and was in fact within her complete legal rights. My mother was not arrested. There were no charges, but she was asked to leave the property, and Darren, I found out later, was placed on a formal performance review. I want to tell you that I felt pure satisfaction when I heard all of this. I want to tell you it was clean and simple. But I sat with my phone after I ended the call with Stephanie and felt something more complicated than that. A sadness, not for what I'd done, but for what had made it necessary. For the version of a relationship that had never quite existed between us. For the specific grief of loving someone who cannot understand that love and control are different things. I reached out to my mother 6 weeks later, not to apologize. I had nothing to apologize for, but because I had done some thinking and some talking with a therapist I'd started seeing, and I had decided that what I wanted was not the absence of her but the presence of a different version of us. One where she rang the doorbell instead of walking through the door. One where she asked instead of decided. One where my space was something she respected because she respected me. I told her this in a phone call. It was not easy. She cried. She told me I had humiliated her. She told me the police incident was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. She told me she had only ever done what she thought was best for me. I told her I knew that. I told her I believed her. And I told her that the shape of her love had not felt safe to me, and that I had needed to create enough distance to figure out if it could be different. There was a long silence. And then she asked, quietly, if she could come and see my new apartment sometime. I said yes. I said she was welcome to visit. I said she needed to call first and wait for me to answer the door. I said if she could do those things, I would make coffee and she could see that I had a bookshelf organized in a way that made no visual sense at all, and she would have to keep her opinions about it to herself. She laughed. It was small and uncertain, and I hadn't heard her laugh like that in a long time. She came to visit 3 weeks after that. She called from the parking lot. She waited at the front security door until I buzzed her in. She stood in my living room and looked at my bookshelf, which is organized by feeling, not color or author, in a system only I fully understand. And she pressed her lips together very tightly and she said nothing. I handed her a coffee cup and she sat down on my couch facing the window, and she said the view was nice. It was a small thing. It was a very small, quiet, ordinary thing, but I had paid for it with 2 years of learning how to say that my space was mine, and the price had felt worth it. There are things I wish I had done differently. I wish I had been clearer earlier. I wish I had said, the very first time she asked for a key, no. Not because I didn't love her, but because the key was never really about emergencies. It was about access. And access, for my mother, had always meant authority. I know there are people who think what I did was cruel, who think a daughter who moves without telling her mother has failed at something fundamental. And I understand that view. I held a version of it myself for a long time. But here is what I know now. Standing in my own apartment on a Saturday morning with my coffee exactly where I put it and my lamp angled exactly how I want it. You can love someone completely and still require that they knock before they enter. You can want someone in your life and still move to a new address when the old one stops feeling safe. You can be a good daughter and still understand that the word daughter does not mean accessible at all times, and does not mean manageable, and does not mean yours. My mother learned something that day at the old apartment, standing in the hallway while a woman she didn't know looked at her from behind a door that was no longer mine. She learned that the key she had been carrying for 2 years was a symbol of an arrangement that had ended, quietly, while she wasn't looking, because I had finally decided that my next chapter didn't require a co-author. She rang the doorbell last Sunday. I heard it from the kitchen. I dried my hands on a dish towel, folded the way I fold it, walked to the intercom, looked at the screen, and buzzed her in. I had made the coffee already. I put it on the table. My table. In my apartment, exactly where I had decided it should go. She knocked on my actual door, waited for me to open it. I opened it. She came in.